Old are your granddaughters?
They are 6 and 8.
Would you support them to get hormone blockers to become the other gender?
I would absolutely support them to get hormone blockers. The idea of one of my granddaughters learning that they're going to start having their period if they don't get their hormones blocked, even though they're identifying and portraying as a male, how horrible that would be. So yes, definitely.
If your granddaughter came to you and wanted to get a tattoo, what would you say?
That would be more difficult. I always told my 3 sons the one thing I ask is please don't get tattoos.
Really? Why tattoos?
There's just something so permanent about it.
Permanent?
It's pretty permanent. It's very difficult to get them lasered off or removed.
You don't think it's like permanent to change your gender?
Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. I really appreciate you clicking on my video, and I hope that you will click on that subscribe button as well. And if you're returning, welcome back. I really do appreciate your continued support on my channel and your comments and your interactions and the discussions that we have. And I would love it if you would make sure that you are subscribed as well. So before I start with what I really want to talk about today, which is a super important topic, so please watch the entire thing, I'm going to play this just little montage of clips of things that I have just seen on Twitter/X over the last week, maybe. And this is super relevant to the conversation today. So it's just maybe like 45 seconds of clips, and then I'm going to talk about what we absolutely need to talk about.
Like, I won't say there are only 2 genders. You know?
Why?
Because it's not true.
Gun reforms.
Thank you, sir.
It's ma'am. Thank you.
But it can make you trans. She was born this way. My other daughter was born that way.
Trying to have a bill that would make people argue and learn that gender affirming care is wrong and dangerous.
Would you say that a transgender woman could give birth or get an abortion?
I am not a doctor.
Okay.
I'm actually a psychologist who specializes in gender affirming healthcare.
Oh goodness.
And so yes, so and it's life-saving healthcare.
Transphobic policy that keeps getting reintroduced year after year.
So in case you're wondering why I decided to start with just a little montage of those clips, I think it's important to make it really clear, if you don't know already, how entrenched gender ideology has become in our society. Like I said, in case you weren't aware of that already, it's in kids' cartoons, it's in their classrooms, it's in our libraries, it's in the doctor's office, the grocery store, the toy section, it's in YouTube videos, movies, games. It comes from their teachers, it comes from their counselors, it comes from medical providers, and it comes from their friends and their youth clubs, and it's in their sports and their activities and the events and the parks that we go to. It is literally everywhere. It's been infused into every thread of the fabric of our society, and despite the fact that there are more and more young people who have been pulled into this ideology, who have experienced it in some way, whether it be just on a social level or a medical level, and talking about how destructive it has been for them to once have been convinced to believe that they could become the opposite sex, we are still having people in all of these areas just continuing to accelerate their efforts and making sure that this stuff gets in front of as many kids as possible before too many more people catch on to the fact that there is nothing healthy or liberating about believing these things at all. And that it truly has nothing to do with being able to live as your true and authentic self, and there's nothing natural, beneficial, healthy, or empowering about convincing anyone to believe these things. And the longer this goes on, the more information and data we do gather from it. And you would think that the more enthusiastic people become about pushing it is because it is backed by information and evidence that says that this is having positive outcomes in people's lives. That what they say about hormones and puberty blockers being reversible is true. That people are having a success rate with their medical interventions and their therapeutic interventions. And that reading all of these books about gender ideology in their classroom is having a positive effect on kids' mental health, and that it's that the reason that we're continuing to allow people to be exposed to this is because it really is doing good to far more people than it is harming. However, the more time goes on and the more that people are exposed to it and the more that we learn, what we learn is how truly harmful and devastating it is, and that the only justification that people can come up with to keep barreling forward is because we said so and because we feel like it. And not only that, the more we learn how harmful this stuff is, and we're learning how much of the science and the data is truly being ignored, the more sinister it becomes to see people continue to want to expose children or people that are struggling with other things in their lives and are vulnerable to the idea that being someone else is going to help them escape those issues, how deeply depraved it is that this is still being pushed as heavily as it is. So if you guys didn't hear, a couple of days ago, an independent journalist by the name of Michael Schellenberger dropped something on X called the WPATH Files. And this is Michael Schellenberger here. And if you don't know who he is one of the main journalists who were questioned about the censorship of journalism. And he, along with another journalist named Matthew Tybee, dropped the Twitter files, I think a couple of years ago at this point, which exposed how truly anti-free speech the previous owners of Twitter were, and how much Democrats had been influencing social media companies to censor stories that shone a bad light on the Democrat Party, particularly the Biden family during the 2020 election. So recently, he's been working on gathering information on WPATH, which, if you don't know what that is, it is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And in the WPATH files, it's described as the leading global scientific and medical authority on gender medicine. And in recent decades, its standards of care have shaped the guidance, policies, and practices of governments, medical associations, public health systems, and private clinics across the world. So I'm just going to play the clip that he posted on X. It's about a minute long, as you can see, but it is really important to at least hear a little bit of what inspired him to do this digging.
Last year, the mother of a transgender reality TV star, Jazz Jennings, triggered a controversy after she described waking Jazz up in the middle of the night to address medical complications from genital surgery.
I have woken Jazz out of a dead sleep and taken the dilator and put the lubrication on it and said, "Here, you take this and you put it in your vagina. If not, I will." But Jazz is bad, even when I'm home once a day. I will be so mad if she goes away to college and that thing seals up. I will wring her neck.
I was shocked by the clip, but then didn't think much about it afterwards. In truth, I didn't want to think much about it afterwards. But then someone gave me the internal discussion files from an organization called WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. We released those files, all 170 pages, yesterday. What they show is the widespread medical mistreatment of children, adolescents, and vulnerable adults. They show that WPATH members and gender medicine practitioners aren't getting informed consent from their patients. That appears to have been the case with Jazz Jennings, who was not old enough to understand the implications not only of becoming sterile, but also of never being able to have an orgasm. As such, trans isn't what many of us thought it was.
So what he's been doing is investigating, as journalists are supposed to do, in case anyone forgot, because that is a rare thing these days. And his goal has been to get to the bottom of whether or not the people at the head of this organization are truly being transparent about the recommendations, prescriptions, treatments, and surgeries they are suggesting that, according to them, kids absolutely need who claim to have even a speck of discomfort in their bodies. They insist that even that tiny, minute discomfort means that the child must immediately be put on the fast track to transitioning. And this is known as the gender affirming model, which numerous therapists and doctors have spoken out about, saying that this is the model that they were trained on how to handle these situations. And part of that model is that they're not even allowed to discourage kids from being trans, or they risk losing their license. And all of these things come from the recommendations of WPATH. And we would all like to think that this group of experts on this specific subject are advising so many different organizations and clinics and doctors and therapists and schools and counselors and educators on this issue, that they would be following the science, that they would alert people to the risks, that they would be interested in sharing whatever their findings are with people to make sure that they're getting the best care possible, that the outcomes for these children are going to be as positive and healthy as possible, and that the trust that people are putting in them is not in vain, and that they would be taking their oath to do no harm as seriously as anyone else is, specifically because so many of these recommendations are going towards kids under the age of 18 and will impact their growth and development, both mentally and physically, for the rest of their lives. And I am definitely getting a little heated as I'm talking about this because it makes me sick to my stomach how evil these people are. Because happiness, health, and well-being is the opposite of their goal. So the whole report is about 250 pages long. No, I have not had a chance to read every single word, but I have read sections of it. And what he gathered were leaked emails and communication between the heads of this organization and their advisors. And what has been revealed is that they confirm the things that we have been saying all along, that those of us that are concerned about what this is doing to children is true, that the science is limited, and that the science that they do have has a whole slew of issues, and that there is this long roster of patients who have experienced devastating and permanent effects of the things that they keep telling us are reversible, like hormones and puberty blockers, and there have been a whole number of issues with these people that have gotten these surgeries that permanently alter their reproductive anatomy. And admitting that the kids that we keep saying are not old enough to understand what they are signing up for, that they agree that they cannot understand the long-term effects of these treatments and of these surgeries and what it means to attempt to change your gender. So let's talk about some of the things that he discovered in the correspondence first. So among the emails was a doctor asking about a 16-year-old patient who had been on hormones for a while and puberty blockers. And I think that they said that, yes, in the email it says testosterone for slightly over a year. And they realized that this person was developing large tumors on their liver. It says, without getting into too many patient-specific details, our team has a 16-year-old patient who was on norethindrone acetate for several years for menstrual suppression and who has been on testosterone for slightly over a year. Patient found to have 2 liver masses, hepatic adenomas, 11 by 11 centimeters and 7 by 7 centimeters, and the oncologist and surgeon both have indicated that the likely offending agents are the hormones and have recommended the treatment ceases at this time to allow for regression of the masses. We are prepared to support the patient in any way we can, for example, IUD, top surgery when medically stable, etc. However, we are wondering if others have experience with this situation. So instead of just saying we are going to stop their treatment right now, they are essentially trying to figure out how to work around these tumors while still progressing in this person's treatment. This is another email where they're discussing about how much information to disclose to the patient about the risks and the side effects, and if it's okay to just assume that these things have been disclosed to them before proceeding. It says, "Hi all, I have been thinking more about what it looks like to fully obtain informed consent. I was curious to what degree, if any, other mental health providers discuss actual rates of surgical complications with clients when providing assessments for surgical care. For example, pain or loss of sensation, need for additional surgeries, necrotic tissue, infection, hematomas, strictures, implant-related complications, etc. I'm also curious if others think it is safe to assume that surgeons disclose actual complication rates versus informing clients that these complications may happen. I realize research on some of these complications may be limited for various reasons." So they're going back and forth about whether or not this extra layer of information should be added, or if everybody can just assume that the other person involved in this patient's treatment has already given them all the information, or if giving them any information is really necessary at all. But it's not just in the emails. This is a Zoom meeting where they are talking about the age range of some of the patients that they're dealing with, knowing that they are younger and that they are young teenagers, and acknowledging that their brain is not developed enough to understand what it is that they are signing up for.
And so one of the things I do is I'm sitting with the youth and their parents, and I say, oh, well, so tell me more about what you know about that medical intervention. And kind of like what Dan was saying, children and young adolescents, we wouldn't really expect them. It's kind of it's out of their developmental range sometimes to understand the extent to which some of these medical interventions are impacting them.
We do it. We try to talk about it, but most of the kids are nowhere in any kind of a brain space to really, really, really talk about it in a serious way.
These are kids that we're talking about, in case anybody needed a reminder. And this is from an article in the New York Post. I will link it in the description box because it summarizes this whole thing really well, but I will also link the entire WPATH file if you want to go through and at least get an idea about some of the things that are being talked about here. But it says, Marcy Bowers, who is WPATH's president, and we're going to just revisit who Marcy Bowers is real quick. But she's the president and a California-based pelvic and gynecologic surgeon who is, says herself, but himself, transgender, and said he considered any age limit arbitrary. Marcy decided not to do it because the tissue, she said the tissue is too immature. Dilation routine is too critical. In lay terms, that means the boys who are too young do not have enough penile tissue for the surgery, and the surgeon must harvest intestinal lining to build the faux vagina. This sounds like Frankenstein surgeries. Even Bowers admits that this can lead to problematic surgical outcomes. She would know, since she has performed more than 2,000 vaginoplasties. Her highest profile patient is 17-year-old Jazz Jennings, the transgender star of reality TV show I Am Jazz. And Jazz has already had this done. I believe Jazz is older than 17 now. I'm not sure, but she had this done when they were like 16, 17 years old, so still a minor. It says 3 corrective surgeries were required to fix the problems of Jazz's surgery. It says she had a very difficult surgical course. Bowers admitted in a 2022 appearance on the show, "We knew it would be tough. It turned out tougher than any of us imagined." And Bowers has a history of downplaying the dangers of the things that they are recommending to these young patients. It says WPATH assures patients that surgical and hormonal interventions are tested and safe, despite the fact that you might develop large tumors on your liver. And it is a different matter in private. President Bowers, for instance, said publicly in 2022 that puberty blockers are completely reversible, although in the internal forum, she conceded it is in its infancy. To the public space, they go along with the trans activist, the media, the leftist narrative that these things are fine, that these are necessary, that these are life-saving. And we've seen a couple of clips now where they know that kids are not understanding what it is that they're signing up for. And then there has also been the issue of what it looks like 5, 10, 20 years down the road, which is really impossible to gauge at this point because the treatments that are being prescribed to people at this age have never been done to this scale before. Yes, we have seen surgeries like this done over the last 100+ years, but to the level that is happening now, this is fairly new. And there's no way to know what that 5, 10, 20-year picture looks like. And of course, with that comes the concern of when they get older, when they are mature, when they have those life experiences, when they really get an idea of what it is that they want for their life to look at, they're going to be faced with these things, with these decisions, with these things that they were tucked into at a vulnerable time in their life, particularly in their childhood, when pretty much you're vulnerable the whole time that you're growing up. And realizing that they unnecessarily harmed their perfectly healthy body, that they cannot turn back those decisions. And now that they want to have things that they didn't know that they were going to want when they were a kid, but now they're an adult and they want things like a family and a long-term partner and a marriage, they realize that they can't have those things. And that, as said in this clip, that a dog just isn't going to do it.
I think now that I follow a lot of kids into their mid-20s, I'm always like, oh, the dog isn't doing it for you, right? Yeah, they're like, no, I just found this, wonderful partner and now we're kids and da-da-da. So I think, it doesn't surprise me.
I think the most egregious thing that he could say in that is that it doesn't surprise me, meaning he knows that more than likely these kids are going to have that regret later in life once they get a hold of their mental health, once they address their anxiety, once they address their depression, once they address their trauma or whatever it is that made them feel like they didn't want to be the person that they are or that they were born as. Once they have the maturity and experience to recognize those things and get a healthy handle on life, they are going to want all of these things that so many people naturally want as they mature and as they get older. So he's not surprised because he knows that that regret is coming and they do it anyway. I don't think it can be overstated how influential WPATH is in everything that we see every single day regarding gender and pronouns and dressing like the opposite sex, or allowing men to access women's bathrooms or play on women's sports teams, and allowing young girls to remove their breasts or grow beards. The scope of reach for these experts has been unending. And thanks to these doctors who supposedly just want people to live as their authentic selves. We have been told repeatedly that there is limited data on the long-term effects of the drugs that these people are prescribing kids, and the quality of life for patients who go for these surgeries that permanently alter and damage and cripple their reproductive anatomy are necessary. Yet the reality is that behind closed doors, they understand the risks, they confirm our concerns, and everything that we are saying is 100% right. And just as a reminder, this is Marcy Bowers from the documentary What is a Woman, talking to Matt Walsh, and we just need to hear a little bit of what she has to say here.
If you've ever heard of people in the trans-abled community, these are people who are physically able-bodied but feel like they should be disabled or identify as such. For example, a man who has 2 arms but feels like he should have 1. If a man in this kind of marginalized community went to the doctor and said, I want to have my arm cut off, do you think that
doesn't have anything to do with gender identity?
Well, it's someone's self-identity, how someone identifies.
That's someone who has and I'll accept it as a mental diagnosis, a psychiatric condition. I don't even pretend to know what aptomenophilia is all about, but somehow it's the idea that you're fascinated or charmed by having a limb or part of a limb missing. Okay, I would say that's, pardon my non-medical language, kooky.
You don't see any? You think this is totally irrelevant?
Yep.
Guys, this is just evil. I mean, when you think about all of the legislation that we have been fighting over in this country, like whether or not to allow minors to have access to gender-affirming care or allow them to just put a pause on puberty to really let them think about how they want their body to develop, or anything else related to this, the idea that they can just take high amounts of estrogen as a boy or high amounts of testosterone as a girl and be able to just stop one day and completely live their lives without any long-term effects from that. And also when it comes to things like schools and clinics and therapists and surgeons across the country who rely on the word of WPATH when they tell them that the outcomes are limited, and the things that they do know support the idea that we should still continue to allow kids to have this option. All of these things, all of the discussions that we're having, every single area of life that gender is involved in any way, comes highly from the recommendations of this organization. And as you can see from the clip that I started this video with, there are still a lot of people that believe it. And because of what these people push and what they have said, when we say that these drugs and hormones cause harm, these are the people that send out the message that this is a bigoted transphobic response simply based on the idea that we don't want trans people to exist, while they are actively holding back cases of people developing things like tumors and cancer. When we say that the data does not support the idea that this is helpful to kids or that it's saving anybody's lives, they're the ones saying that kids will die without access to these things, while behind the scenes talking about the fact that they don't know what it is that they're getting themselves into and that they are going to regret this decision, that there's a high likelihood that they are going to wish that they hadn't harmed their bodies in this way down the road when they get older, when they have the maturity to understand these experiences. It's almost as if they're trans activists in public, but conservatives behind closed doors. And the more that we know, the more information that we gather and realize that this is being done intentionally, because there is no possible way to have this much information behind closed doors and then push it publicly with any semblance of a desire to do good being involved in that decision at all. The only reason that you would be pushing this on kids is because you are trying to turn them into permanent, long-term, crippled medical dependence to bring in a stream of revenue for the mental and medical systems for the rest of their lives. And to create an entire society, an entire next generation of people where so many of them are too mentally and physically harmed and devastated to contribute anything productive. So thank you for watching this entire video. Please hit that like button. Leave any comments and thoughts that you have in the comment section below. Please share it with others. People need to know that this stuff is out there, because I am so shocked how often I hear that there are so many people that don't even know that this stuff is happening. I mean, you and I know because we pay attention. You know, we click on videos like this. We read these tweets. We read these reports. We look past the headlines and we look past the talking points. And we really try to get to the bottom of what the truth and the facts are, because we're the ones that actually care and want people to become healthy, strong, well-adjusted, well-rounded, productive individuals. But there are so many people who are still buying into this stuff and not paying attention and truly have no idea what is happening. And a lot of times too many parents figure it out the hard way when their child comes home and they have been so immersed in this ideology already that it's pretty much impossible to get them out of it. And their child is bound and determined to get these treatments and to get these surgeries, and the parent hasn't been paying attention at all and they don't know how to stop it. So please make sure that you are subscribed. Help me to grow this channel, because I'm pretty sure YouTube is going to hate this video and try to suppress it as much as possible if they allow me to publish it at all. Keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Pardon my non-medical language, kooky.